Thank you guys for joining us on today's expert series. I am joined by Stephanie Bogan, who is a coach and a 30-year career of helping advisors, top producing advisors, sort of look at what that next level in their business looks like, how to define it, how to create ways to get there, how to use strategy and business building techniques to kind of help them reach that second level and then beyond and then beyond and then beyond. So her company is called Limitless, which is fitting. So we're really excited to have her here. We're going to talk about all the things that you guys need to do to build your practice with strategy and scalable growth in the long term, making sure you have a vision right, all those different things that go into making sure that you are on the right path at the right time in the right direction. So thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining us. How are things?
Well, they're good. I'm happy to be here, Blake. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Well, so like I said in the intro, what we're looking to do is trying to talk about how advisors need to build their success and create that thriving advisory practice. And one of the things that we recognize here is that a lot of advisors and business owners in general, they kind of get the tactical piece. They get the idea of the to-do list. This is the goal, this is what I need to do, and I'm just gonna do more of that more often, and that will get me to my goal. And they reach that midpoint somewhere in their career where they go, holy smokes, I should have more by now. It shouldn't be this hard still. What's going on? And we find that like if they can get the vision, we can get the big pieces together, the big picture, they go, oh, and then they can lean back into something that actually is good for them and they're passionate about. What's sort of your take on what a thriving advisory practice can look like when you apply some of the mindset pieces to it?
Well, I think you hit on something that's really important. I often say when the vision is clear, the decisions are easy.
Mm,
Not without effort, not without economics, or at least easier. And what I mean by that is it doesn't mean that you enjoy the decision that you're making, by the way. It means that there's clarity about what the decision should be. And I think to your point, a vision, a lot of successful firms, advisors for the most part in this profession are successful through comfort and compounding. I'm a good advisor. I'll show up. I'll do good work for 10 or 20 or 30 years, right? And I've done a good enough job for my clients between share of wallet referrals and the markets. There's the compounding part. I can build a really nice 7-figure practice. It's probably pretty stressful. Like some of you are like probably in a really good place. A lot of advisors find themselves working harder and harder and harder. And it feels like they're making less and less progress. Like it's incremental relative to the effort that they're putting in. So if you don't have a clear view of what you want to build and why, it creates an environment that is ripe for complexity and dilution. Here's what I
mm,
mean. That as you were talking about the average advisor's day, I do it all the time. Aaron does. And this is right with all love and respect. This is what the issue is for 80% of advisors out there. They're stuck in the pizza parlor playing a game of whack-a-mole. I have kids, go to the pizza parlor, that like machine, the
yeah.
box, and it's got the purple heads that pop up, and you take the whacker. That is what I'm consulting with $1 billion firm right now. $1 billion firm. And they come in and we need to fix this and we need to fix this. And I said, we do. And it took you 20 years to create this situation. It's going to take us more than 20 days to unwind it, optimize the practice, and then really position you to hit that next level of growth. We can do it faster and better than most people, but we cannot do it overnight. And
Right.
so a game of whack-a-mole is we get into a reactive, survival-based leadership style. It almost always happens as a function of time and capacity. There's a very predictable curve in this profession, right? You hit your first capacity threshold around 300,000, right? That's where you can't do any more of the paperwork and the phone calls and the service yourself. You tend to hire a staff person, part-time or full-time. You hire a few more of those until you get to about 700 or 800,000. Then that's when we, according to the benchmark studies, tend to hire that second advisor, right? We're trying to create some capacity. According to those studies, this blows my mind every time. You will hire that advisor around 800,000 or 900,000. They will, on average, never do more than 600,000 or 700,000. This makes no sense whatsoever. You have to run a firm, manage compliance, hire people, train them, service the clients, do everything, and you're doing more than the person you hired to just service clients, right? And then we replicate that again and again and again, and what you actually find is if you're not really careful, your margins go down over time, but your complexity and your stress go up because now
Yeah.
not only are you managing your client base, you're managing advisors, you're managing the people that, right, whether it's 3 people to 8 people or 8 to 18 or 28, you are essentially managing greater degrees of leverage. Think about like if I put a penny on this pen, like I can manage that, right? But if I grow this organization and I don't put the proper structures and systems, people, process, and platform in place, I have a really long rod and I put that penny on it, it's a lot harder to wield.
Yeah.
And I think that's how a lot of like, they're like, whoa, I got to go over here and I got to go here. And so we all like what I hear day in and day out is I feel stuck in the day-to-day grind.
Mhm.
I'm not sitting in a seat that energizes and motivates me, that's adding maximum value to my company. Like, hey, Steph, I think I actually need to become, someone said to this meet last week, I think I need to become a leader. And I said, I agree, right? Like being an advisor is very different than bringing a leadership and an ownership mindset, clarity, discipline, transparent, right? Those things that we need to lead an organization into the next level. So to us, I think we're super aligned. Vision is the bogey for everything. It does not mean that you have to know exactly what to infinite detail. It means you need a directional sense
Mhm.
that you want to add people to your team or you don't, right? You want to get bigger or you don't. The average firm, and I think people forget this, at 7.5% growth, you're going to double in 10 years. So if you're 50 and you're listening to this, just showing up and doing what you're doing. So I just sat down with a $400 million firm and we went through this exercise and I was like, okay, it's 7.5% and you're going to be an eight. The G2 is like the sun's taking over and an $800 million firm with your current ratios means you're going to have 12, 15 advisors. And he was like, what? Like we
Yeah.
literally went from it's the two of you and two staff people to you're going to have 12 advisors in 10 years. And he was, and I said, and by the way, that's not, that's, you have a much bigger problem because you're not growing 7.5%. If you are, the markets are doing reasonably good and you have any kind of share of wallet and referrals coming in, you're going to be growing at 15 to 20%, which means you're going to double in about 5 to 6 years. So if everyone listening just takes their client base, their time, their complexity, their headaches, their problem, their staff, and their expenses, and they just double it, the question is that what you want more of?
Right.
Well, firms come to me all the time. They do, Aaron, like, can you help me grow? And I'm like, what do you want to grow? Because I'm pretty sure you don't want to grow what you brought me. You want to grow like 20% of it. And we've got to right size this business to, right, optimize for time, capacity, and margins, right? No more whack-a-mole. We've
Right.
got to optimize for leverage. We've got to professionalize the practice and scale it, which means people, process, and platforms, service models, org structures. We can talk like those are not, there's not one way to do that. It depends on the kind of business you are, the clients you have, and what kind of growth plans you have. So when you get the vision, it creates space for you to evaluate each decision that you make on behalf of the business in right through the lens of that business. Is it in service of that goal?
Right.
That's what stops whack-a-mole. Nothing else stops right? Whether it's a post-it, literally it could be a post-it on your desk, right? I'm going to have a $3 million firm. I'm going to take 100 days off. I'm going to have a 30-day vacay in the summer, like Steph, without any issues. I'm going to work with 25 of my favorite clients, right? I'm going to build this cool thing. Like if you can define it, your brain's ability, to your point around mindset, infinitely improves in terms of its ability to help you make that happen. So those I call them the invisible forces. Like you're just like, why is it so hard? Like it's supposed to be so much easier. Those invisible forces, 95% of the time, are happening between our ears. It's how, to your point around strategy and tactics, the 6 inches between our ears are responsible for 95% of our success, according to the latest research in neuroscience.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think that that saboteur, that voice inside your head that tells you you're not good enough and whatever it happens to be, you can't argue with it because it's always right because it has evidence on you since you were five.
Yeah.
So when you say, well, I'm going to have a $500 million practice and I'm going to have this, it's going to take 3 years, that voice goes, I don't think so. And let me tell you why. Because you fell off your bike the second time you rode it, you didn't get back on for 5 whole minutes. That shows that you don't have the work ethic. And it will talk to you and tell you how not enough you are.
Yeah.
So you got to play with those things. One of the things that I help people try to figure out too is that I want you to focus on the W's first. What I mean by that is when you say you have a goal and I want a $300 million practice, 100 days off a year. You go, that's great. I want that. And then you go, how am I going to do that? Well, your brain kicks in, your saboteur fires up and goes, you're not going to be able for all these reasons, right? I want you to focus on the W's. What's it going to take to do that?
Yeah.
Oh. Who do I need to connect with in order to build resources around that? Where can I find my champions to help me create that? Why do I even want this? Focus on those W's first. And what will happen is you start to create this plan without really even thinking about it. And then you achieve it. And then you can look back and go, wow, how did I do that? And it becomes a totally different conversation with yourself. I want to touch on one more thing too. You mentioned that if they look at their practice currently and they start doubling, they're doubling 7% in 10 years, right? We're noticing that with this whole generational shift of wealth and all the things happening, that it's getting harder for advisors to just kind of rest on the metrics.
Yep.
And they have to kind of level up who they are as the advisor, what their position looks like. And I love that you're saying come in as a leader.
Yep.
Don't be an advisor, because an advisor is you can throw a rock and hit 12 of them. We want to have a leader, a business owner who has a financial services business. And that aligns with what we do because we're trying to help advisors see that vision too. How do you view advisors that are hungry, that want to grow a big practice and are also struggling with the idea of being more than just the ROA and the ROI and returns they can provide for their clients? Taking from the money manager advisor to the comprehensive planner, lifestyle advisor.
You mean in terms of like how they make that transition?
Yeah, because I'm looking at it like I can't imagine that they're gonna have way more stress and way more problems and way more headaches if they continue being the money manager and double their business. But if they're looking
Yep.
at something more holistic, more well-rounded, it feels easier to me. But
Yeah,
what's
so
your
we
take?
have, so I think to your point around vision, we have sort of a very predictable, right? To your point around W's, like all consultants and coaches, right? We have models that work because, right, success leaves clues and we find them and we replicate them. The how question, I think you covered two things there. One, just the drop in what we're seeing kind of as a drop in growth. And what I mean by that is, yes, we are seeing organic growth rates decline. They've dropped from about 8 to 9% to, right, 2.5 to 3.5%, depending on which study you read. And so you ask so you've got, right, clients are finding people before they come to you is what is essentially happening. Like, why are those numbers different? There are more people than ever looking for advice. Hands down, the best time there's ever been to be a financial advisor.
Yep.
And yet organic growth rates are dropping. They're dropping because firms are following the marketing guidance that good consultants give them, which is you need to differentiate in this marketplace, right? It can be a niche, it can be a specialty, it can be a pricing model. There's like 5 or 6 kind of core differentiators. But the issue is those clients, potential clients who used to have a need and be like, oh, I'm going to call Blake or I'm going to call my CPA. They don't need to call you or their CPA now because my clients are inserting themselves in that process, right? Whether it's email or content or blogs or webinars or seminars or podcasts, people are getting marketed to very proactively.
Oh
You've
yeah.
got banks and trust companies and anybody that can get some AI software and a hire going, hey, here's a financial plan. So we are seeing the competition increase. What we are also seeing is firms that understand how to build a growth engine, whether you're a small firm or a large firm, are growing. Like we have clients regularly, right? If you follow us and see are like 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x. I've been coaching with Michael Kitces for 5 years. He's 10x'd his portfolio of businesses almost twice.
Wow.
10x almost twice. Now his businesses are different, obviously, but we see, right, we have advisors all the time that are 2xing, 3xing, 4xing, and 5xing in that many years, not in 10 or 15 or 20. And it's because when you pull the right levers at the right time, you can affect that change on the time and capacity side and then on the growth side.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think to your point around growth, it's really important for firms to figure out what their growth model is. If it's going to be, just your organic share of wallet referrals, maybe, some networking, you need to understand that that's become about 2/3 less effective than it has been in the past. That may not be the case in some of your practices, right? But most firms skip over the basics and go out for the shiny, sexy stuff. And you can honestly, in many cases, right, 50% or 2x a practice by putting systems and structures in place that specifically deliver more value to clients more consistent, right? Think service models and things. Like we have 2 advisors right now who are part of our program for next year. They both got to $1 million in 4 years. Neither of them had to go do any big growthy stuff. They literally share of wallet referrals. Like they got brilliant at the basics, as we like to say. For firms that are kind of making a transition from money management to planning, honestly, I would say if you're making any transition. I was just on with a firm, G2 advisor bought his father-in-law's firm. It's about, I don't know, 150 million. Right, he's in the transitioning clients from mutual funds right into like planning relationships. He's in the same boat. And so what I would say to people is you really want to ask yourself, what's the seat that you want to sit in?
Mhm.
One that energizes you, your economics and your joy. Like so many advisors, Blake, especially when they're successful. If you're a seven-figure advisor and you've been doing this at least 12 to 15 years, there's a wildly good chance that you're guilty, bored, or wondering what's next. Or you're overwhelmed and stressed and you feel like you're stuck on a hamster wheel. Like think your avatars, right? I talk to advisors all
Yeah.
the time. I'm like, are you bored? And they're like, oh, I'd never say that. I'm like, well, why? You've been doing the same thing for 15 years, day in and day out. It's automatic to your brain. You should be bored. If it's not hard, if it's hard at this point, we have a problem. The question is, why aren't you putting yourself in a seat that doesn't bore you? Right. And to your point, it's our mindset. We are so hardwired not to change. The odds of change are stacked against us 9-1 on a
Hmm.
daily basis. We are 95% likely to think, do, and act today exactly the way we did yesterday. So you're listening to this podcast, and I promise you, if we were on a webinar and I was like, drop in the chat your biggest problem, it would be time, capacity, managing my team. I got to drive growth. I don't like, service isn't consistent. I feel like I'm keeping up all the time. And then the question I'm going to ask every one of you is, why haven't you fixed it? You can drop it in the chat, which means you know you have a problem.
That's true.
You have done hard stuff before. Why have we not solved the problem? And it's because we literally are on automatic pilot. Our brains are in survival mode. We are hardwired to do the same thing, maintain the status quo, because if we don't, our brain is literally hardwired to say, if you say no to that prospect who asked you for a discount, they might tell the client or the COI, and then they'll find out, and then they'll probably tell all the other clients, they'll all leave. You'll file bankruptcy, you'll lose
Yep.
everything, your spouse will
Just
leave,
spin out of control.
you'll get eaten by a hungry tiger and you will die. And
Yes.
that happens in a fifth of a second in your brain. And so we come in the hamster wheel and we are conditioned to come in and do the same thing and complain about it
Yeah.
to ourselves. So those voices in our head are what's stopping us because they are saying, you can't change your fee schedule. You can't raise your fees. You shouldn't do that. Clients won't like it. You don't know how. Like Stephanie and Blake are talking about building service models and specialized, like you don't know how to do that. Well, no one knew how to do what they're doing right now the day that you started. You know how to figure stuff out, but we get comfortably uncomfortable. We get stuck in our habit loops, and we have three of them: our thought habit loops, which govern 95% of our success and well-being. Everything that you have, be, achieve, or experience. 95% of it happens here. Our behaviors, do you go home and like check your phone first thing, or do you sit down with your kids, or do you read a book? And those two things together build all of our business practices. Everything that is or isn't happening in your business is happening because of a choice that you did or did not make between your ears. Everything that advisors complain about. There's a great Tim Ferriss episode. I can't remember the consultant. Best question, like it's just like gold star question, right? So we all share. The question is, everyone needs to ask themselves this question. How are you complicit in the situation that you are now complaining to me about?
Mm. Powerful. I like it.
It is a powerful question. Powerful question.
Yeah.
So as you sit there listening, right, where you're in your car, there are things that run through the hallways of your mind regularly every day. They're the same kinds of things. It's a staff issue. It's a I wish I had more time issue. But the reason that we don't solve for them is because our brain, when we present new information, is hardwired to see obstacles, not opportunity. If I
Yep.
raise my fees, people won't like it, bad things will happen. Your brain does not usually say, that's why people hire consultants and coaches and right, get buddy groups and master. Your brain does not go, Blake, you are so awesome. You should totally do that. The guy down the street's doing it and you're way better than him. Like, go you, it's going to be fine. You might lose a client or two, but you're going to be okay, dude. You can, you will, you got this. You're a rock star. Like, go deliver great value to your clients. If it talked to you that way every day, we would all be running the world.
Right. It'd be huge,
It would
huge.
be huge, but it doesn't. 95. So here's the kicker. Literally, I have to share this with you because this was the one piece of information that literally changed the course of my career. It's why I talk about this today. Carnegie did the study in 1906, right? Three factors to success: knowledge and location, right? Dumb in Dallas, you're going to get a different result than genius in Dubai or vice versa. That's second, skills, love that. You can acquire them or get them. The third was mindset or psychology. The part about that study that was mind blowing, it was the first time that someone had determined that it was 85% at the time. Now we know it's about 95%. 85% of our success is attributable to our mindset because when an idea is presented, we have a view of it.
Right.
And that view, to your point, is governed by our limiting beliefs, not our you got this. It is governed by every bad experience, and we are in avoidance mode. That survival brain has one job: don't die. It doesn't wake up and say, hey, Blake, if you optimize your practice by raising your fees and putting a service model in place, you're going to optimize your value in your life. Why don't we do that today? It goes, go check your email. That's a really good way to get your dopamine hit and stay stuck in this rut because we're habitually addicted to this rut.
Yeah.
So we literally have 5% of our brain, right? We have to insert ourselves in that process and on purpose say, I'm going to break the pattern. I'm not going to do this anymore. And I think that's where consultants and coaches can be like in Limitless. I know Aaron has, right? We have scripts, we have strategies, we have frameworks, we have models so that you know what the model is and you can develop that skill set while you're building a clear and confident mindset that says, I'm not an imposter. I'm worth every ounce of this fee and then some because I'm delivering value in excess of it. Right. And so there's just, if you put the mindset with the method, right, a good best practice, you will see 2x, 3x, 5x with the same amount of effort or less.
Yeah.
That's the kicker. If you can come in, be honest with yourself about where the practice is, what you need to do, envision in your client model drives everything. Who the client is drives who the team is. That's driven by the growth model. If advisors are driving growth, you've got to have that in your org chart, your comp plan, your career path, your equity track. If you're a massive lead gen firm and you're just lining up service advisors, that's an entirely different organizational structure, comp plan, management structure, path to equity, right? If you're a hybrid, it's yet another. And so there are 4 or 5 organizational models. There are different ways to do service models. There's different ways to build a growth engine. We have to decide that we're going to sit in the space of identifying our challenges. What do we need to solve for? I love you have a question very similar to mine. What will it take? How am I going to do that? Automatically put you in a defeated, diminished, it's going to be hard mode. What will it take? Automatically, because your brain is a curiosity problem-solving machine. If you go, what will it take to double my income and take 60 days off? Your brain goes, well, I don't know. It shows up with obstacles and possibilities, but if you're consistent, your brain actually turns on the dime and it goes, well, now I got to figure that out for you, don't I? Because you mean it. So the trick is we have to tell our brains we mean it. So we have an idea, we get pissed off, we have a wish, and then we go back to the same thing tomorrow. If literally a post-it, put a post-it on, we do this with our clients, put a post-it on your computer, like I want $1 million practice, I want 100 days off, or I want a $3 million firm and 8 weeks off, and I want to sit in the seat where I work with 25 clients, grow the firm and lead, and I want, right, everything else. Like if you tell your brain that over and over and over, you are literally laying new neural pathways. And like, again, there are ways to expedite and accelerate that. But if you do that consistently, your brain eventually goes, oh, wait, we changed the destination. The destination is not we're staying in the garage. The destination is we got to go out and change some things. And
Yeah.
when you overcome that invisible force field, if you will, of you creating your own resistance, that's how we just see such radical, rapid results in firms is now the landscape is clear and we can go pull the levers with a lot of ease and change can actually start to happen pretty effectively.
Oh, awesome. And you bring up the point where it's all about what you're consistently doing. Do you go home and have time with your kids? Do you check your email? Are you never able to turn it off? You are what you consistently do. And so we talk about, well, if the firm's going to grow and you're going to have 12 to 15 advisors based on your trajectory, this particular client you were talking about,
Yep.
a lot of advisors we speak to go, man, I need a team build. And then when we go, great, hire someone, it's just like deer in headlights. So when we talk about trying to figure out what to shift in their mindset and make that conscious decision to consistently pursue this thing, what are some of your best practices for getting the advisor to let go of the reins, empower the team to actually do the things they're hired for, rather than hiring someone and then also doing that person's job along with their own?
So, you'll love this. I have a client right now that's running a very large firm, and they hired a director of operations, who is now spinning his wheels very much like the leader of the firm. I went in and I said, you basically just created a copycat.
Mm.
You just magnified the problem, right? We didn't insert someone, right? Because the leader in this case is having an incredibly hard time letting go. Right. So we go into this conversation. I'm like, okay, what's the struggle? And he's like, well, of course, we got to do things right. It's a big firm and growing. There's a lot of change. Right. At the end of the day, we all, when we're not operating at our best, right? When we're not in that. So there's kind of two states that we operate in. This is the answer to everything, by the way. So if you
Okay.
take a piece of
It's the answer,
paper,
you guys. It's the
no,
answer to
no, I'm
everything. Here
telling,
we
well,
go.
it's the answer to most everything. I'm not, watch, you're going to see, this is magic. I'm going to draw a line on this piece of paper. Above the line is what I call success state. This is where when you're in a conscious, clear, positive, I'm not going to do that. Of course, I'm going to do that. I'm going to start a firm. I believe that I can, like creativity, abundance, joy, optimism, positivity, contribution, all happen here.
Mhm.
There is a biochemical state in your brain, right? Dopamine, serotonin, like happy chemicals are happening here. There are two parts of your brain. You have one brain, two minds. So you have the caveman brain. It lives right here in this little thing called the limbic system. That's the caveman brain we've been talking about. It's running the show 95% of the time. Its job is to keep things the same so you don't die. Discomfort, totally tolerable. We know
Yeah.
that because we all settle for it day in and day out, right? That's not this side of your brain. This is the Einstein part of your brain. The Einstein part of your brain lives here. It's your prefrontal cortex, right? It's our executive. This part of our brain is logical and rational. It lives in the future. When I say, hey, what's your growth goal? Double it again, now quadruple your time off, that will throw your brain into absolute panic because it's like, how am I can't do that. And it will literally take you from, hey, I'm in this happy place, right, where everything's possible down here. So down here is what we call stress state or survival state.
Mhm.
Science says we are here on the average workday 70% of the time. That's without any outside stress or influence. That's the
Yeah,
average
I
person.
totally agree with that.
Think about your day. I got to check email. I got to get here. Like we're in a task list wheel. We just got to go, go, go. Anything happens, that number jumps. So what's happening is in success state, you're getting happy chemicals and your Einstein brain is on. The clear, conscious, logical part of your brain goes, well, I wouldn't do a discount. I've got 100 other clients I wouldn't do a discount for. We're totally worth it. That makes no sense because it's thinking, it's on. Your caveman brain, my husband loves it when I call it that. Your caveman brain, your survival brain lives in stress mode. The second, Blake, everyone has had this happen. How many people have given a discount? No one wakes up and says, I want to be a planner. I'm going to hand out discounts. No one. We go through research. You look at some other ADVs. You pick a number with the best of what you think is fair for the service you're going to provide. You actually file it with a state and regulatory and potentially federal body, for most of you listening, the SEC, and you say, I mean this, and you publish it. And then a prospect walks in and says, well, Blake, that's really great, but I'd like a discount. And you go, okay.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So you are essentially saying, I really put a lot of thought into this, but the second that you challenge me, I realize that my view of my worth and value is immaterial. It's really yours that matters. So how about we let you decide what my services are worth? That is essentially what we're saying. A prospect has literally decided they need planning. No one does this by accident. They've talked to some people or found you via your podcast or website or whatever. They've gone to your website. They have checked it out. They've probably spent 15 to 30 minutes on the phone with you. They've had a first meeting. They've spent another hour or two with you, hopefully not that long, but nonetheless, you've probably done some planning work for them, which is a whole separate conversation. And then you have presented a plan. You have both invested a lot in this, and they look you in the eyeball or through the Zoom, and Blake, they say to you, this is amazing, Blake. We really like this. We appreciate this value. There's just one thing, one tiny little hitch in this giddy up. We think it's valuable. We just don't think it's as valuable as you do. So how about we get all that awesome and all that value? We just get it for 75% less. And we're just not going to tell those other clients because they weren't smart enough to ask. But when you take my phone call and you do my work, I want you to be as committed to me as you are everyone else, even though I'm paying you 25% less. What do you say, Blake?
Well, I would like to say no, but I'm gonna say yes because I want the client.
Right. When I ask rooms full of people this, they're like, no, no, I would never, right? I would say no. And I'm like, you don't. If you've ever said yes to a prospect, barring pre-rent and ramen, I call it the rent and ramen stage, right? If you are brand new and you got to put milk in the baby's bottle, yeah, you're going to take any client you can get. But the second that you meet rent and ramen, you can pay your rent, think college, you can eat ramen. Everything else is a subconscious compromise. To your point, consistency compounds. So
Mhm.
when we do fee evaluations on firms, for example, they're like, we made a few exceptions, regularly $80,000. We had a $600,000 firm in our lifestyle coaching program. $600,000 firm found $110,000 in fees. I have a client who runs an 8-figure firm, $400,000 in fees. Client with an $800,000 practice, $80,000, 10%. Now, let's take the lowest case scenario, that $80,000 over 20 years. He was 38 at the time, right? You're at $1.96 million. You add 7% compounding interest, you're at about 2.4 million. We're not even talking about, right, actually the monetization value of that. That was if he stopped when we noticed it at 38. Many advisors running 7 and 8-figure practices have, right? We have this problem we call the gold star problem, which is you're doing too much for too many, for too little, for too long, and consistency compounds. And so you don't have time, you don't have capacity, it starts to erode your margin, you start hiring people to fix those problems, and it actually compounds the problem.
Yeah, it goes the wrong way.
You are literally taking the complexity and the dilution that you like, the complexity of people and the dilution of margin, and you're multiplying it. So we call that sizing.
Yeah,
And
so
most firms size, they don't scale. Scale is figure out how to optimize each variable in that equation. And suddenly those benchmarks that I told you about, you're not bringing someone on at 800,000, you're doing it at 1.2. That person isn't managing $600,000 or $700,000 in revenue. In our firms, they'll manage $1 million to $1 million too. We literally double the margin on each advisor in the system. So we're adding capital back, whereas most firms, when they're hiring advisors, they're borrowing from the margin of the last advisor to pay for
right.
the next one. And it's just enough. And then if you're not like that's how you end up with a $1 billion firm and an 18% margin. You've grown your way into that. Now you'll sell that firm for a bunch of money, and right, and that's the goal on those firms is not necessarily to drive margin, right? It's to drive revenue and growth because they're going to get a higher multiple.
Right. So there are
Separate
two
company.
things that we just want to touch on before we end because there's so much value here. But like there's two main things that I'm getting. We're all trying to grow these practices. All these advisors are trying to level up and figure what that looks like with their vision. But what are the two things are one, what are some strategies to scale without burnout?
Yep.
Because we all look at scale, we just have to do more and accomplish more with less, but then we can't really rationalize what that means. So how do we get some scale without burning out? And the second is what what is one of your favorite ways to overcome a roadblock to change, to get that advisor to all of a sudden get it and start moving in the right direction? So those are the two things I'm most curious about from you now.
So I think it's a good question. I'll start with the second half, which is how do we create change? It is literally with things like this, like, hey, where are you operating? So here's a good example, right? If I'm in success state and I make a decision about my fee and I build a script and I say it out loud 30 times so my brain gets really comfortable, I'm going to, right, I'm going to hold to my boundary and my fee, and my practice is going to be better for it. If I operate down here, it's not. Down here is where fear, uncertainty, doubt, anxiety, stress, the I can't, I shouldn't, I don't know how, I'm an imposter, they'll all leave me, that all lives down here. So the number one thing you can do, which is very counterintuitive, is not just go out there to fix everything. It's to ask yourself, how am I complicit in the situation that I've created? Because in that ownership and is the agency to remedy it. If you
Hmm.
cannot do that, you will hire consultants, you'll do things, you'll spin your wheels, and it will get incrementally better. It will. You can build a good firm, but you won't hit that, wow, I've got the time, the freedom, the margin, the team that fuels my vision. I'm sitting in a seat that energizes me and adds value. I can scale growth without feeling burnt out and tethered and tied to this thing. And I'm optimizing my value and my freedom every step of the way. So if we are not operating here, which most of us aren't most of the time without, right, inserting ourselves into that process, we lead from here. Here's why that's important. If this is so we draw a thing we call story and state, right? So if my state is I'm an imposter, right? If I'm feeling like, yeah, I'm not sure about this, it means there's a story. That story might be I'm an imposter. It means if I fail, people won't like me, right? Like, if I fail, I'll be financially bankrupt. I grew up in a trailer park. Like, that is not okay for me, right? Like, I will do an awful lot to make sure that doesn't happen again. Right. So we're driven by our stories because they drive our state. Am I above the line or below the line is based on what's happening in my head today.
Hmm.
Your largest client calls, you're in a good mood. Largest client calls, leaves a message, doesn't tell you why. What's the first thing you think?
Oh no, they're leaving me.
Yep. First thing we go, bink. By the way, we tend to stay there the whole rest of the day, week, or month. Are we in our best spot to be of service?
Oh goodness, no.
No, because our brain is like, I'm going to get fired. I got to go look in the file. I pick one of four walls. We all live here all the time. I protect, I prove, I hide, or I defend. None of those are in service to the relationship. That's where my brain is. If when that phone call happens, I understand this conversation, I'm like, oh, that thing with Steph about above the line and below the line, you want to operate above the line in success state. When that message comes, you go, here's how you know you need to do some work. It doesn't feel good. So simple, right? The phone call comes and you're like, oh, you feel stressed out, above the line or below the line. If you approach situations above the line, your practice will transform in 12 months. I am not kidding. Above the line says, I'm going to build a script for that prospect. So when they ask me for a discount, I'm going to consciously look them straight in the eye and without hesitation or apology say, I really appreciate that you see the value in the work that we do. And I respect that you might have a different budget than our fee schedule supports. We truly believe in financial planning and we want to be of value to everyone, but our fees and service reflect the level of services that we provide, and we don't compromise our fees because we don't compromise our value. We understand we're not going to be a fit for everyone. If you feel like you want to pursue planning and you just need to do it on a different budget, we would be happy to refer you to some resources that might be a better fit for you at this time. If you'd love to move forward with us, we'd be honored to serve you and we'd be happy to have that conversation. What feels good for you and John?
Right, right. Very good. Well done. Well delivered.
Like, I can say that because when I worked in a practice, I said it a lot, and I
Yeah.
get like you get I can say it like my middle name, which makes it believable.
Right.
If you cannot say it like your middle name, it's not believable. So literally, to your point about tactics, no joke, all of that was any tough conversation you need to have, these minimums, challenges, objections. If you can write the script and say it out loud 30 times, you're literally laying new neural pathways in your brain. It's not new in that moment. So the default isn't, yes, I'll do it. The default is the script. And it'll be a little bit bumpier the first time than the third time, but by the third time, you'll say it like I say it.
Well, like to follow up on that, this is why we use scripting and we give things that Aaron's created over the years because when we tell you if you do these things, it will work and you'll close an appointment the very first time you meet with them. You can bring in $1 million clients
Yep.
the same way you bring in a $200,000 client. And the advisor goes, yeah, it sounds good. Well, let's try it. If they do try it and they read the script, what happens is the clients go, yes. And they
Yes,
give them
every
money, they
time.
pay for the plan, and then they go, oh my goodness, that's evidence
I
this
say this
works.
in total jest to the people listening, but we all have these it's like we're not practicing on you guys. Like, we've done this 1,000 times. We know it works. That's why we're giving it to you. One
Yeah,
of our advisors said, I joined the program. He was like, I've been trying this for 12 years on my own. I'm just going to show up. I'm not going to argue. I'm going to do what they say. And he was like, and it totally, so literally, like the sales process, he was like, I can't even say like I changed it. He's like, I literally borrowed it and it worked, so I didn't change it like at
right,
all. So
right. That's
literally
it.
the stuff that Aaron is giving you or that you get right out in the world from us or the websites or newsletters, like the issue, ladies and gentlemen, is not that you don't have the strategy, the solution, or the worksheet to solve the problem, is that you haven't made the choice to do it.
Right.
Google can answer everything. I've written a zillion articles. Aaron had, like, there is a ton of information out there. The problem isn't information. The ability is our willingness to see the information, its relationship to the results that we're getting, and sit in a conscious space and say, hey, I need to make some changes.
Yep.
That's the hardest thing we do. I always say if it were easy, everyone would do it.
Yeah. And we'd all be wildly successful.
We
So
would all be wildly successful.
in your last hot
Strategy.
take, what would you say are like the last two actionable steps that you would give an advisor today that's listening to this recording and going, okay, that's cool, but what's my next step? What should I be
So
thinking about? What should I be doing?
aside from mindset, there are three things that I say, like, everyone should go pull these levers, right? It will change your practice. One, mindset. Seriously, it is the biggest game changer of all.
Mhm.
If you're like, that doesn't apply to me, there are two exceptions. Like, do you know what they are? There are, if you're like those stories and the limiting beliefs and those voices in my head, like Steph must be crazy because she hears voices. I do. All of us do. There are two exceptions, people who don't.
Oof.
Sociopaths and
I
psychopaths.
was gonna
So
say, like, I
if
don't
you
know
are the
anybody.
exception, please call someone because you need deeper. Like, there's that element of like, I don't like this idea. Like, that's not for me. We're not talking about laying on the couch with a tissue box. Like, we're talking about just having a radically honest conversation with yourself about why you keep compromising on things that make no sense to compromise. There's no business case for giving clients things for free because you can't figure out how to say no because your relationship has changed over the last 10 years. There's no
Right.
reason to have advisors on your team that aren't performing at a certain level because you don't know how to create accountability and boundaries. There's no reason to not have a reliable double-digit growth engine because we do it all day long. We look out here for the problems, and yes, the scripts, the strategies, the worksheets, I call those scaffolding. We need to give those to you guys and gals so that while you're building the mental skill muscles and the habit muscles that we talked about, right? The mindset view and the habit muscles, you need that scaffolding so you can actually have the confidence to sit across from that first prospect and try it. If you don't have that and you're on your own, it's very hard, which is why Aaron's program is effective. It's why ours is. There's a lot of others. So time and capacity are the mindset. So we call them base camps. If you're going to climb Everest, you don't just go straight to the top, right? You have to acclimate. One is time. I wrote a great article on kitsis.com called Taking Back Your Time. It's like our time model. Aaron probably has one. If you don't own your time, you don't own your business and you don't own your life and you're kidding yourself, you are in a very well-paid game of whack-a-mole.
Yep.
And it's cool. It can be great. You can have a vacation. You can work with clients that you like. But if you have agency over your business, you know it. People are astounded that I take the, that I work 25 hours a week. They're really astounded that I take a 30-day vacation every summer like it's no big deal. Have since my kids were young. Like, my team, like, there's not even big meetings around it anymore. I put it on the calendar and everyone knows, and I go off and I do it and I come back. And so for a lot of our clients, that's a goal. Like, hey, I want to be able to do that. And so what I would just ask everyone to really think about with this conversation is what is really stopping you? It's going to be clarity and consciousness. That's mindset. When the vision is clear, the decisions are easy. Right. The second piece is time. You can tell yourself you want to do it. If it is not in your calendar, it doesn't exist. It's a
Right.
wish, not a commitment.
Mhm.
Michael and I live by our calendars, right? I tell people I just literally I show up and do what I'm told every day. This was on my calendar 12 o'clock. I showed up at 12 o'clock. You're like, you have these questions. I'm like, nope, no one gave me like it is very like this is how things work, right? Like we have a process, you guys have a process. And so time is really important. Most people don't have a model. I'm sure you guys have a model, right? And so that you have to do that. The other is capacity, and this I'll get more specific on. Capacity is about right sizing your client base. Most advisor firms that are over seven figures don't have a really optimized client base. Who's the client we do our best work with? Each segment of the client base is defined. We have verified that each segment of the client base is actually profitable on its own merit. Why does that matter, right? Like, oh, Stephanie, they don't take too long. They really don't take that much time, right? All those things, the rationalizations are the reasons that consistency compounds and it increases complexity.
Yeah.
So right sizing the client base is looking at the goal. Where do we want to be as a firm, right? Whatever that next time horizon is, looking at the current client base, segmenting and making sure each segment is profitable, aligning services, and then potentially implementing one of what we call the three terrifying transitions, right? Increasing fees, changing services, or changing advisors either internally or outside of the firm.
Sure.
Way too many people are doing that too much for too many for too little too long. And if you pull this lever, which is the scariest lever that you can pull, you will gain time, you'll gain capacity, and you will ultimately gain revenue. I've been doing this for 30 years. Erin's been doing it for a long time. I'm pretty sure she also doesn't have stories of optimizing the client base and things going really horribly. I, knock on wood, have been doing this 30 years, not literally knocking on wood,
Mm.
not one time. Not one time, Blake, has an advisor called me and said, that was a bad idea. It didn't go well. You know what they do say to me time and time and time again? That was a non-event. Like that was really not
Yes.
a big deal. I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, we hear
And
that too.
two, wow, I really wish I'd done that sooner. And then the ones that like start with tranches of clients, they're like, I'm just going to try it. Do you know what they do every time? When they get through that first tranche, they're like, all right, baby, let's go. Like no one died. I'm working with clients that really see my value and right are happy to pay for that value. We don't give ourselves permission to do it because we think it's going to go bad. We're going to look greedy. Clients are going to leave us. Those are all 100% stories in your head,
Right.
unless you've been doing a really bad job, in which case, yeah, go fix your service model before you do any of those things. But if you can get a handle on clarity of vision, which is where we started, whether it's a post-it, I'm sure Erin has fabulous exercises. Like if you don't tell your brain what you want it to do, two forces will: yesterday and everybody else. And neither of those forces are fueling you to that next level and stage of growth. They're just not. They are keeping you squarely stuck in the status quo, living that uncomfortably comfortable, like I wish, but it's not bad. And you just like, you feel like if only you could,
Right.
then you'd be able to. And I know that everybody has that more and better that calls, if only I could fill in the blank, then I'd be able to. My challenge to everyone is, whether it's right sizing your client base, putting service models in place, building the right team structure, is get really clear. Here's the powerful question. All of you are making choices about how to spend our time on this planet, irrespective of what you believe happens on either side of this life. We can agree that this is a short trip between two eternities. No debate about what's happening in the eternity, right? But it's a short trip. So the question I ask everyone to get really clear on, and it's a stop and think about it question. Let's look at I call it a 10-year view. You're not going to know exactly what the business is going to look like, right? Maybe 3 years you'll have that. But the 10-year view is this. You're going to spend the next 10 years. If you're 30 going to 40, 50 going to 60, whatever it is, here's the question. What do you want to invest your time in? And to what effect? Unencumbered by the stories that will shrink you. Just sit down on and do walk, run, bike, whatever you do. If you can get yourself in a good physical state, that's when you do this exercise. Don't do it at the end of the day when you're overwhelmed and frustrated and below the line. If you get in that state and you give yourself permission, Stephanie and Blake gave me permission to do this exercise without listening to the voices in my head. What's the biggest, baddest, coolest, awesomest version of your practice in life that you could possibly imagine? Write it down.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing you're going to do is write down on the back of that. So you don't get to judge it. You get all the boundaries. You're going to figure out where your brain thinks possibility lives. I could 10x that for anybody. But that's where you're going to find where your brain can go and be like, this is the biggest thing I can imagine. It doesn't mean you have to go there. It doesn't mean it needs to be bigger. Then you turn that page and you write down everything that runs through your mind about why you can't, you shouldn't, or you don't know how.
Yeah.
You look at it and you ask yourself, is it really true?
Right. Totally true. Yes. Is this
You have
true?
to literally call it out to your brain. Is it really true? We're so short on time. I get excited about this stuff. Lots of exercises. You can Google like I did. You can read my stuff. Erin's got stuff. It is about calling out our own BS. And by
Mhm.
that, I mean belief systems and the other stuff.
And the
And
others,
you cannot do that if you do not, like, everyone is busy and overwhelmed, right? We all know it. We all also know the real truth, Blake, is you cannot shove 10 pounds of shiznit into a 5-pound bag and ever get anything that isn't messy and stinky, ever.
right?
And we show up every day and we do the same thing and we're like, why is it messy and stinky?
It's
Right?
just
Well,
the
you gotta, like, and we just get really used to it. So if we can create space, that's the part, that's the 5%, to turn on the Einstein brain without all of that. Again, run, like, do something to yourself in a really above the line place, and you ask yourself better questions. You will get better answers.
Yep.
Then you can sit in that space of what would it take to build a firm like that? So I'll end with this story. Most people are familiar with Michael Kitces, who's been a client of mine for about 5 years now. I told you, like, he's 10x. He started with 2 or 3 people. There's now 28. That's the growth curve.
Yeah.
So when he had write his editor, which did all the writing, like, big job for Michael. That person resigned to take a really cool position at a university. It was kind of his dream job at the time. Michael, he calls me for one of our coaching calls, and he's like, how am I ever going to get someone to do this job? And I said, well, there are lots of people who want to do this job, right? They're just not you. We're into that conversation. And then I asked him, I said, this is going to be a really annoying question. I said, but I do really want to ask it. And I want you to take that big brain of yours and I want you to reflect on it. And I said, what would it take to make this the best thing that ever happened to your business? And he said, you're right. That is an annoying question.
Yeah.
And then he got as quiet as I have ever heard Michael Kitces get, like, quiet. He was like, I'll think about that. No joke. He came back to our call 2 weeks later with an org chart with 25 people on it. That is the org chart that is almost identical to the org chart that he has today.
Yeah.
All I did was give him space and permission to think about this below the line experience. He was so fear, uncertainty, doubt. How am I going to solve? Like, all I did was give him a little question, one question, because the brain, you can hack it. That's how we get the results. If I can ask one question or put the one right thing in front of you to get your brain where it needs to get to, it will do all the rest of the work. You will figure it out. You will find a way, or you will make one. All I have to do is convince you that that's the right decision.
Hmm.
So as soon as I said, what will it take? Your problem solving brain goes, I don't know, but you go off and do stuff. And in the back of your brain, it's trying to solve that problem. And it's like, ooh, you're walking the dog, or you're taking a shower. And suddenly it's like, and he's like, it just all came out.
Hmm.
And so we're so busy being on the hamster wheel, right? We're below the line. It's like if you surf, right? In Costa Rica, we surf, like, you get stuck below the waves and it just keeps crushing on you and you can't get above it and catch your breath. That's what most people on this call are trying to do. They're trying to get above their success so they can catch their breath. So there's some open space to think about what they want and what they need to solve for and how they're going to solve for it. And you cannot do that from below the line. You
Yep.
simply.
Yep. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for today. You've had so much knowledge just to share it and throw out all the different ideas and concepts and all the experiences that you've had with your clients and your teams and their experience in working with you and growing. So, really great insight. I'm glad we had this conversation. And for anyone interested, you can go to limitlessfa.life.
Yep.
That will get you to her website. You can learn more about her, her articles, all the things that she does. And how you guys can connect and learn more is up to you. And we hope that this has been super valuable. And stay tuned for the next episode.